Welcome to the Folktale Project. This is Dan Scholes. This week, we're visiting with Hans Christian Andersen because, well, quite frankly, it's been a while, and I just love his tales. Some are literary tales, some are folk tales, but all of them are wonderful. This first story is, well, it's sad, but that's kind of a staple of Hans Christian Andersen's, isn't it? But it's also a story about rebirth, about not being tied to what one thinks one is best at. This is The Teapot. There was once a proud teapot. It was proud of being porcelain, proud of its long spout, proud of its broad handle. It had something before and behind, the spout before and the handle behind, and that was what it talked about. But it did not talk of its lid, which was cracked and riveted. These were defects, and one does not talk of one's defects, for there are plenty of others to do that. The cups, the cream pot, the sugar bowl, the whole tea service would think much oftener of the lid's imperfections and talk about them, than of the sound handle and the remarkable spout. The teapot knew it. "I know you," it said within itself. "I know too my imperfection, and I am well aware that in that very thing is seen my humility and modesty. Imperfections we all have, but we also have compensations. The cups have a handle, the sugar bowl a lid, I have both. And one thing besides in front, which they can never have. I have a spout, and that makes me the queen of the tea table. I spread abroad a blessing on thirsting mankind, for in me the Chinese leaves are brewed in the boiling, tasteless water." All this, said the teapot, in its fresh young life. It stood on the table that was spread for tea. It was lifted by a very delicate hand. But the delicate hand was awkward. The teapot fell, the spout snapped off, and the handle snapped off. The lid was no worse to speak of. The worst had been spoken of that. The teapot lay in a swoon on the floor while the boiling water ran out of it. It was a horrid shame, but the worst was that everybody jeered at it. They jeered at the teapot and not at the awkward hand. "I shall never forget that experience," said the teapot when it talked of it later in life. "I was called an invalid and placed in a corner, and the next day was given to a woman who begged for victuals. I fell into poverty, and stood dumb both outside and in. But then, just as I was, began my better life. One can be one thing and still become quite another. Earth was placed in me for a teapot. That is the same as being buried, but in the earth was placed a flower bulb. Who placed it there, who gave it, I know not, but given it was. And it became a compensation for the Chinese leaves and the boiling water, a compensation for the broken handle and spout. And the bulb lay in the earth, the bulb lay in me. It became my heart, my living heart, such as I had never before possessed. There was life in me, power and might. The heart pulsed, and the bulb put forth sprouts. It was the springing up of thoughts and feelings which burst forth into flower. I saw it. I bore it. I forgot myself in its delight. Blessed is it to forget oneself in another. The flower gave me no thanks. It did not think of me. It was admired and praised, and I was glad at that. How happy it must have been. One day, I heard someone say that the flower deserved a better pot. I was thumped hard on my back, which was a great affliction, and the flower was put into a better pot. I was thrown out into the yard where I lay as an old potsherd. But I have the memory, and that I can never lose. And that is the Hans Christian Andersen tale of the Teapot. A story of, really, of finding yourself in ways and places where you might never have expected. This is Dan Scholes for the Folktale Project. Don't forget that you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, Overcast, anywhere you like to get your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Folktale Project. You can find us on Auto Radio, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, anywhere you like to listen. And you can always head over to folktaleproject.com, where you'll find a new story waiting for you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Don't forget that if you'd like to help support the podcast, you can always head over to patreon.com/folktaleproject, where for as little as $1 a month, you'll get early access to every story told, as well as a little something from me. As always, thank you so much for listening.